welcome to the fourth Media Innovation Festival. Super cool to have all of you here with us today. Really excited to have you all in Vienna. I hope everyone's travel was smooth. Really awesome to see so many familiar faces. I cannot wait for the discussions today, tomorrow. But before I take you on a brief tour of the Modernist exhibition downstairs, our innovation work at IPI, I am going to hand over to Scott, our executive director, to welcome today's event. Scott, come on over.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Griffen. I'm the executive director of IPI. You may have seen me if you were here at the IPI World Congress in October. But it's my pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of IPI to this year's Media Innovation Festival. We heard from Ryan that this is the fourth edition of the festival, but the first as a standalone event. So we're really excited about this year's event. We're really delighted to have all of you here in Vienna for 2 very full days of collaboration, networking, and conversations on opportunities for independent media to strengthen their resilience at a really, obviously, challenging global moment. For those of you who may be less familiar with IPI, I just want to start by sharing a few brief words about our mission and the broader significance of our media innovation work. So IPI is a global network of editors, journalists, and publishers dedicated to protecting press freedom and strengthening independent journalism. Our network brings together more than 1,000 members in around 100 countries. And what makes the IPI network really unique is that our members hail from an incredibly diverse range of news organizations. We have members from legacy print media to public broadcasters to digital startups, all of whom share a commitment to press freedom and a belief in the power of community and solidarity. We're also open to new members. If it's of interest to you, you can find members of our team during this event over the next 2 days. IPI was founded in 1950, so we celebrated last year our 75th anniversary. And IPI's founders were leading editors from 16 countries who believed that the free flow of news and information was essential to combating propaganda and building free and democratic societies. That remains our core belief today, and it also shapes our strategy and our activities to support and protect independent journalism. So IPI today works across 4 different fields, four core fields. We have our advocacy program where we document and respond to threats to press freedom and independent media, and we work to ensure an environment in which journalists and media can do their work freely and safely. Our journalism support program provides different forms of support, including grants and legal support to critical sectors of the media with a focus on investigative journalism. Some of you may know our IJ4U fund for cross-border investigative journalism, for instance. And through our media innovation work, we support the development of tools and strategies for news organizations to secure sustainability and deliver public interest news to audiences. And finally, through our membership network, we support networking, professional exchange, and solidarity at a time when press freedom is under extreme pressure worldwide. So these focus areas reflect what we see as the necessary ingredients for independent media to fulfill their public function. They need to be free and safe. They need to have the resources and support to do their work. And they need to be able to reach and have impact with audiences, as well as benefit from peer support around the world. So our media innovation work, including this fantastic Media Innovation Festival that you're here for, reflects and is directly centered in our broader mission of supporting press freedom and independent journalism. So simply put, it's informed by the need to ensure the strength, impact, and ultimately survival of a free, independent, and critical news media amid what we all know are these enormous market and political pressures that we face today. So we're really grateful that you've all joined us here this week in Vienna. It's obviously also a symbolic moment. We're marking World Press Freedom Day this week. For those of you who may be interested, we marked this week, this year's World Press Freedom Day, by publishing a documentary film, a short film called Defending the Future of Free Media. It features voices and stories really spanning the IPI global network from Hungary, Turkey, Philippines, Mexico, the U.S., Gaza, and Hungary. And it's a film that really demonstrates the resilience of our members and partners, but really the wider journalistic community, who are at the forefront of defending press freedom and the public's access to news around the world. It's on our website. We would really encourage you to take the time. It's about 25 minutes to view it. So again, this is marking World Press Freedom Day this week. So just to wrapping up, look, we're really looking forward to the conversations over the next 2 days. Just to say that also we're really grateful to the donors and partners who have made this event possible and who support our European and global innovation programs and initiatives. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank our incredible media innovation team, which has put on this great event, as you'll see. And on that note, I will pass the floor back over to Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. So I'm going to stick with you for the next 25 minutes to do two things: set the scene of the festival in our innovation work at the International Press Institute, but also ideally create a call to action to get involved in some of the conversations that we're having. I'll round off my discussion with a bit of what I mean by that, but there will be a couple of threads that are really kind of woven throughout the next few days that I think will resonate with each of you. And we really want to continue this dialogue, as we, continue working on these issues through until the next festival, which will ultimately be in 2027. So, 2 seconds. Huh? Oh, yeah. Here we go. Cool. So, as I mentioned, this is our 4th edition. Last year, our 3rd edition in 2025. Amongst other theses, we actually that were picked up throughout the discussions about technology, about the creator economy, about entrepreneurial journalism and what that looks like in practice. One of the theses that we came up with at Print is the new digital. Obviously, it's meant to be provocative. Everyone's still investing in their digital business, but having print products seems like a way to differentiate, to invest in authenticity, to invest in proximity to your users. And it was just an interesting provocation. And I bring it up primarily to say, over the next 2 days, our goal is to come up with another thesis. What are we thinking about might work, might not work over the next 12 months? And this should be hopefully a shared experience that all of you can contribute to. So of course, as Scott mentioned, right, like we're a press freedom focused organization. The state of affairs is not, as good as it could be. Just this past few weeks, the RSF World Press Freedom Index came out with a statistic that 1 in 100 people only have access to information from ultimately a healthy media landscape. On top of this, there are other unfortunate facts that even just in 2026, there's already been 13 journalists killed and continuously 471 in prison. But for me, this ultimately presents a paradox, and I'll talk a bit more about that. But really what I mean is that's outsized influence that media has, despite the reality that very few independent publishers are able to scale or to grow beyond slim margins. And I'll get more into the details, but we know that there's a new set of pressures on the sector. They're ultimately intersecting, woven together. AI, obviously, the consumer market, infrastructure dependencies. Last year, we spoke at length about the role of big tech in the back-end infrastructure of how we build media companies and what are the realities going forward. Obviously, political pressure and capture. We have our press freedom team in the room here to talk through all of those examples that we spend all of our energy at IPI focusing on. Audience fragmentation, competition from creators, from alternative media ecosystems, from prediction markets, attempting to assume the role of journalism. And we also know about the economics of journalism under pressure as well. It's being squeezed. News leaders are forecasting over the next 3 years a 40% decline in search referrals, and the days of easy subscription conversion are in fact over. But you also have people coming up with visions for our sector that are coming from outside of the industry. One that I really just wanted to bring up because one, it's recency, but also it's impact on the dialogue happening at organizations like IPI and peer organizations is this the founder of Applied XL in his paper, Who Will Monetize Truth? And in this case, his vision is, or his distinction is this kind of repricing around one specific question. The ability, so basically how some companies sell awareness of things that happened, and others are selling the ability to act on that information before anyone else can. And the price differential, of course, is significant, and you can learn more from his paper. But why I wanted to bring it up, because it really puts the onus on discussions here. Because it leaves a lot of public interest media behind in this vision. They see intelligence businesses, one in which the journalism itself is to structure data and verify facts, whereas in public good, in this world, investigative journalism, foreign correspondence, and local news will not survive. And we, in our sector, working across conversations in public policy, in media development, know just as well what that future can look like and where that leaves us. But going back to this question of the paradox, I think media at the end of the day still sets the agenda in many cases. I looked to two examples. A couple of weeks ago, you had the election in Hungary where the former President Orban lost. And one of our close partners, Direct 36, published a story on communications between Hungarian and Russian foreign ministers. I think every one of us in the room had seen a reel or a clip about it, but this is a conversation that's being driven by an independent publisher. In Vienna, where we are today, the weekly newspaper magazine Falter broke a story recently on the 360,000 staff records from the Interior Ministry that ended up in the hands of the Freedom Party. And ultimately, the theory is that they ended up in the hands of Russian intelligence services, and this is being investigated. But ultimately, the point being, independent media are telling the story. They're setting the agenda. And economists have obviously done a lot of studies of this and shown that it improves voter turnout, raises the cost of corruption, and improves government responsiveness to citizens. So how do we respond? I think as Scott had brought up, to defend press freedom, we do need a myriad strategy. You have some are throwing a bunch of opportunities against the wall and seeing what sticks. At our advocacy work, we're monitoring and bringing attention to the digital, physical, legal threats to journalism. Obviously, we're funding investigative journalism through our IJ4EU project. But in our innovation work, we're really placing a bet on the ecosystem, on creativity, on uniqueness, and the process itself. We see the distinction between those who survive and don't, explained by, clarity of audience strategy, diversity of revenue, quality of operational systems, depth of community connection, and a willingness to experiment. We hope to expand the pool of newsrooms on the surviving side. We focus on the levers newsrooms can pull, whether it's rebuilding direct connections, diversifying across reader support, institutional partnerships, and earned income, as opposed to depending on a single source of revenue. And ultimately building operational infrastructure that allows smaller teams to really perform in a competitive market. We've, in our work, in just the last couple of years, have supported 98 organizations in 62 countries. Some of them are in the room. I hope you get to know them if you haven't already. But we've learned a lot in those couple of years. And I won't go through everything, of course, but just a couple of highlights that I think drive a bit of the curation of the program over the next few days, but also I think might resonate with some of the voices in the room. One thing about revenue, obviously really important conversation about independence and editorial independence, but product first, revenue second. A differentiated product, really leaning into that process, into your unique value proposition is absolutely critical before moving into conversion and monetization. infrastructure matters. Having and working on a unified CRM or investing in first-party data, allows outlets to segment, to retain users, and ultimately monetize audiences, and that really has to come first in this process. And ultimately, if and where possible, diversification is absolutely critical and not optional. 3 years ago, alongside a Columbia Business School professor, I published a revenue roadmap, also in collaboration with Report for the World here, and we analyzed around 30 revenue types across ad-based revenue, service-based, and content-based, alongside legal structure approaches. And we looked at pricing strategy, at your competitor set, how you define a value proposition, and ultimately manage this inside of your own organization. And that was our kind of first step towards thinking about this question of diversification. You also have this major trend that we will talk about a lot in the next days is platform disintermediation. I mean, the problems are clear. Like 69% of news searches you are not yielding any clicks. You have agentic browsers merging into the ecosystem, which are also reducing publisher traffic. And what do we do about it? I think direct relationships become really, really important here. I think Tony Hale, he's the founder of Chartbeat and Scroll, came up with this idea of the archipelagos of high trust private communities. Of course, that requires investment in groups that might be disparate across many platforms, but I think are critical to the future of the sector. AI adoption, I mean, to take a slightly more positive spin than a lot of the potential critiques of AI, 72% of news leaders are planning AI experiments. This is from the 2026 Reuters report. We at IPI have built a global AI accelerator for media with the help of one of our donors. And this has allowed us to focus on where and when AI itself can drive opportunities and financial viability. But some of the stuff we're working on are things like propensity scoring of potential users across the funnel, making product life cycles more efficient. There's a lot of news about people deploying new products really quickly, unifying fragmented data sources. That really powers that shared that infrastructure question about customer relationship management. But I also, two more on the trend question is also the value in trust. In an era of synthetic content, verified editorial credibility can command premium pricing. That goes back to the sort of how does that fit into the broader ecosystem question, and ultimately really grounding that in your USP. But as long as sourcing, attribution, and payment models aren't protected or built into that model, it gets a lot more difficult. And finally, the middle path. This is a pretty encompassing idea, but I've tried to fit in network models, consolidation, mergers, and shared infrastructure into this. We haven't worked with these, but we're close with some of them. Village Media, for example, is a Canadian publisher that has that hosts 59 local sites, and they offer editorial, community-based marketing, a publishing platform, a community hub for local businesses, amongst many other membership functions. And that's really, for me, an instance of building an enormous network and providing that shared infrastructure behind the scenes. You have creators investing in their own networks. There's a couple in the room, like Fight Media in the Philippines. Spot On is another one who we had at the Innovation Festival last year. They're building ecosystems of creators to actually drive attention to the journalism that they're doing and connecting with. You also have, mergers in this case. Especially for smaller newsrooms, mergers are a significant opportunity for potential success. News Laundry and the News Minute, both in India, neither of them are here, but they were in the International Journalism Festival announcing this a couple weeks ago. And the idea here was to really offer, provide shared infrastructure and consolidate this kind of fragmentation across so many audiences in India. And that for them is a recipe for longer term survival. To bring it back to IPI now, Our model for sort of direct intervention is really meant to adapt to the different market realities, looking at how established an outlet is, how differentiated the product is, what their primary revenue sources are. And we've really have 4 primary pillars: our training and funding work, which I'll talk about in a second, our community of practice, so really the discussions that happen at places like our Innovation Festival, but also online, our research and expertise, so working with communities of experts, but also investing in research on things like revenue, diversification, and other subjects, as well as partnerships, those who you can, of course, see on the roll-up behind me, but even beyond that. This is a little bit about how we work. So this is our sort of like training cycle that works across 12 months. We start by auditing the organization. We typically bring everyone we work with to Vienna for a couple of days to really invest in design and audience sprints, where they really get to know their peer group and also kind of design and build what the next 100-day plan might look like. Building and testing, measuring and launching, and scaling and sustaining are all critical pillars to that model. One of those approaches is the new media incubator. This is our early stage work. A couple of them are in the room. This just closed, I think, a week or two ago. And here we work with startup newsrooms. Some of them are about to go to market. Some of them are, a year or two around. But in those earlier stages, we help organizations figure out their model and really define that unique selling proposition to their audience. For example, EU Made Simple is a group that's in the room. You can say hello. He's around. Within the last 8 months, we helped them triple recurring donation income and build a federalized contributor model with revenue share for community translators as they developed into different markets. We also worked with From the Republics. This is a really interesting publication covering the 21 indigenous republics in Russia, and they've actually become, through the last 8 months, the market leader in those 21 ethnic republics. We have our Global AI Accelerator. I mentioned it beforehand. In this instance, we're covering small to medium-sized newsrooms, and we're helping them with everything from building a vision and strategy, developing data systems, deploying AI in scalable ways, reimagining their value proposition, driving revenue, all situated in a very critical dialogue on ethics. We partner with organizations like the Pulitzer Center to make sure that that's possible and genuine. For example, one organization, they're just getting going currently, but we're helping them build a hybrid paywall and subscription system, which includes, propensity scoring, but also mapping user journeys. And there's so many other cases that are also here. Food from Zanzi is in the room, Fight Media is in the room, Tayet's in the room. Reach out to them, get to know what they're building, and hopefully you guys can share experiences. We've been partnering with the Columbia Business School for the last couple of years on some research projects, and we just concluded one of those last week. And in this particular case, we were looking at strategic factors that are informing pivots, and especially successful pivots in the context of disruption. And that, has been a really unique part of being able to build an interdisciplinary ecosystem. It's funny, we were chatting, and they're very used to clients that have these very singular objectives in mind. Could be, maximize revenue as high as possible. And one of their challenges of looking at the question of independent media was, the impact, the measurement is quite difficult comparatively, and it just shows how unique the type of support independent media can need. And in light of that, we've really looked into a number of pivot types and the levers that serve them. And this is just a list of those that we're really focusing on as we work with organizations. Audience definition and niche capture, product and format innovation, asset monetization, operational excellence. That goes back to the CRM infrastructure. I just wanted to leave you with a little bit of context about what IPI does and how we work. But ultimately, I think what we'll find out today and what we read every day in our newsletters and picking up on social media is that change is here to stay. I think the low barriers to entry to tech adoption are ushering in an abundance of innovation. Everyone's vibe coding new apps, tools, technology. So I think the question becomes, where's your value addition in all of this? What's the currency that you have in your direct audience or beyond? And I think, in that context, and as a bit of a call to action for all of you, in the next few days, get creative with what you're building. I think we all need to invest more in creativity and uniqueness in this moment. Sometimes this is about experimenting with new ideas. In other cases, it's about identifying and leveraging underused assets. I think that's a really undervalued approach working with independent media. Looking for what's creative or unique about products over the next few days. There's so many cool entrepreneurs in the room here. Figure out and what questions might come up based on their approach to their market. What's making sense with their audience, and think about that in your own work. And finally, I think my call to action as well is let's continue these conversations beyond the next 2 days. We have people here talking about unlocking private capital for the independent media sector. There's a lot of discussion about AI adoption. There will be debates about tech dependencies, about creators and the middle path that I mentioned beforehand. I think another interesting one is interdisciplinary learning, looking into different industries like the gaming sector or the entertainment sector. I was just at a very large video game convention in Boston a couple of weeks ago and was absolutely baffled, one, by the market size of that industry, but also just how creative and niche that ecosystem is, but how much energy goes into it. So, let's keep these conversations going, stay in touch. And we really want to help nurture these conversations as much as possible. So that's it from me. I think, just a quick rundown for the next few days. So we'll have 2 conversations after this, looking at the value of media innovation in the face of constant disruption. I think for me, a very important, entry panel to explore, what are the incentives driving the work we do, and what does innovation actually look like? And then a discussion on attracting funding to journalism. We'll have a reception here afterwards. There will be a buffet, and you can hang around until 10, 11 o'clock. And from tomorrow, we'll be opening the doors around 9 o'clock. There will be a workshop already kicking off at 9 in the atelier room, but the main program will start at 9:30. Across these 3 different rooms, the stage, atelier, and library. That's in the Impact Hub. So we look forward to seeing you there, and that will ultimately finish with a closing session at the Impact Hub, and we will pivot to another drinks and dinner reception at a separate venue called the Hotel Brillantengrund, but we'll guide you there as best as possible at 5:30 tomorrow. I'd be remiss not to mention all of our partners that make all of this possible. Of course, the European Union and our sponsors who are in the room, Report for the World, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for bringing speakers from all over the world to come over, the Erste Foundation, Silly and Climate Exchange, the Media Innovation Lab, which is hosted in the Vienna Zeitung, and Display Europe, as well as our programmatic partners who you can see here. So I think with that, we can move on to the next panel. But really, I just wanted to say a final welcome. I also want to thank all of the team at IPI. Scott mentioned it before, but the IPI innovation team has been absolutely critical to this. Most of them are in the back, but Yasi, Dana, Alina, Nikki, Dinara, all really, really critical to making this event happen. I'm sure you'll meet them over the next few days, but really happy to have you all here, and thank you for being in the room. And without further ado, I will hand to Preeti. Thank you.